They should only be able to work under the supervision of a qualified GP. Otherwise, it really isn't safe and not safe for patients. And I wouldn't think that the SAS doctors would want that degree of working outside of the scope of their own skill sets.
Send in the SAS. No, not that SAS. They are specialty and specialist doctors. That's hospital medics below consultant level. The Times has learnt that NHS bosses want to use them to help fix waiting times in GP surgeries. But will moving doctors from one part of the NHS to another just shift the problem? What do GPs make of it? Let's speak to Professor Kamila Hawthorne, Chair of the Royal College of GPs. Morning, Kamila.
Good morning.
What do you make of this? So the punter response, by which I mean my unsophisticated response, is to say these are qualified doctors, we need qualified doctors. Is it not a good thing to move them to GPs where there is a high load?
So we're very happy to work with other professionals within the NHS. I'm still burning with indignation from what you said earlier about can't any doctor be a GP, because of course they can't. GPs are expert medical generalists. They've undergone 3 years of very intensive training and qualified with really quite complex and high standard exams at the end of it all. So one of the things that I really want to make clear this morning is that SAS doctors, however much we may need and value them, cannot replace GPs. And everybody, I think, in the NHS agrees with that.
Well, the GMC don't agree with it because they've said they are a ready and willing pool of talent and can make a transformative change.
Well, I don't entirely agree with that. I think they are valuable. I think that they may well be very keen to come and work in primary care. We don't know that for sure. But they cannot replace the work of a GP. GPs are experts in dealing with undifferentiated illnesses, people coming with a variety of symptoms that need to be put together to make diagnoses and management plans. They offer continuity and holistic care in a way that really no other doctor does. In that they are looking at the physical, the psychological, and the social aspects of whatever it is that that person sitting in front of them is presenting to them. And then they can offer acute, chronic, and preventive care all in the same consultations. So that really, in itself, is a pretty expert specialty in its own right.
And you don't think a hospital doctor, say you got an empathetic hospital doctor who is willing to listen, who can understand social and psychological aspects of what they're doing, with clear training in medicine, worked in a hospital for a considerable amount of time, they couldn't pick that up, you don't think?
They become very specialized in their field, whatever it is they're doing. Say it's a dermatologist. Dermatologists will be really good at picking up skin conditions. They won't be really good at picking up obstetric problems or children with illnesses or people with complex diabetes and hypertension, for example. So if we do get SAS doctors into primary care, they may well be very valuable to us as part of our multidisciplinary team, but they should always work under the supervision of a qualified GP. They should not be working unsupervised.
And if they can't work unsupervised, does actually do they become less of a use to you? Because ultimately the theory behind this is there's all these doctors who can move. If you could put them in the front line in a practice where there's currently 3 GPs, it could create a 4th or a 5th doctor there. That would make a big difference to the amount of people that could be seen. What you're saying is that ultimately they could only work for the existing GPs.
They should only be able to work under the supervision of a qualified GP. Otherwise, it really isn't safe and not safe for patients. And I wouldn't think that the SAS doctors would want that degree of working outside of the scope of their own skill sets. Taking that dermatologist SAS doctor that I've already described, they will not feel safe themselves working outside their own skill set, which is in high grade, super specialized dermatology.
But what happens if you get people who have also in their medical career done some emergency medicine, for example, have done some more generalized medicine? Are there people who become specialists who still in their professional lives have done general medicine? Could they be of use to you?
So yes, of course they could be of use, but again, under supervision. People get rusty quite quickly. And nowadays the trend in hospital medicine is to become quite super specialized. There will be some doctors maybe who've worked in accident and emergency, for example, who could be very useful to us in general practice. But again, it needs to be done under the leadership and supervision of a fully qualified GP.
Because there is this cynicism out there. You'll have heard it with some GPs. You know, we've all been to GPs who when it looks complicated, they send it to a hospital doctor. So there is a view that GPs are triagists. They're people who sift through things, but when it gets actually to the more complex medicine, they pass it on to hospital doctors. So there will be a reaction of people saying those people who are already doing the complex medicine could get to it sooner if they were in the front line themselves.
Yes, but again, let's go back to the dermatologist doctor. That dermatologist doctor does not wish to be faced with a complex kidney problem because they won't really know how to handle that. So that needs
But would
to
a
go through
GP would a GP not say you've got what looks like a kidney problem? I'm sending you to a kidney specialist.
No. In many cases, a GP can handle most of the cases that come to them, at least 90% plus of the patients that come to us. And we're seeing well over 1 million patients a day are handled purely in general practice. And it is really only the super complex problems that require a specialist opinion or an operation, for example, that will be referred on to secondary care.
Are you surprised, Kamila, that there seems to be excess doctors in the hospital system? Because that doesn't seem to be the narrative we've been given, that all of a sudden we can find 60 to 100,000 SAS doctors who aren't needed in hospitals. Does that surprise you? Because that is one implication of this, I suppose.
It's a fascinating thing, isn't it? We know that the numbers of hospital consultants is rising slowly. I think it's about 17% rise. The numbers of GPs, as we all know, is dropping. But the numbers of SAS doctors has risen considerably, and quite a large number of these are doctors who qualified abroad in another country and have come here to work in the NHS. They're really valuable. They become really quite specialised in whatever field it is they've chosen in hospital, and just decanting them into general practice is not really going to work unless it's done in a properly supervised way.
And just finally, then, what happens if? How does it work then? If the government say this is our plan, we've got all these doctors, we're going to give them to the GP system. Can they do that? Can they just say? I mean, how much say do you have in this?
I think we have a pretty strong say. I think we make our feelings very clear. What we've said to the government and to NHS England is that we're interested in this idea. We need much more detail. We're still waiting for answers to some of our questions about funding, about piloting, about induction and supervision and training for these doctors coming into general practice. We don't want patients to be shortchanged by just a sudden influx of doctors who are not GPs and are not expert generalists. It's not safe.
Kamila, thank you for taking the time to speak. It was really interesting stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's Professor Kamila Hawthorne, Chair of Royal College of GPs, pushing back on the notion inherent in some of my questions, and I think in some of the responses to this story generally, which is if you're a doctor, you're a doctor. But she talks about expert generalists. And if you're a GP, you're an expert generalist. And if you're a specialty or specialist doctor, you might have done some general medicine, but you'll be rusty and you've become a dermatologist, and therefore you can't just step into being a GP.
And what's going to be a headache for the government is she said there, they can't work unsupervised, otherwise it isn't safe. So that doesn't solve the problem, does it?
It actually makes more work. It's the class. It's like having a work experience person. It's like they could do a bit of photocopying, but you have to spend all your time explaining it to them. Then you actually might as well do it yourself.